Why does someone suddenly disappear without explanation, going from consistent replies and genuine engagement to silence, leaving you replaying every interaction in your head, trying to figure out what went wrong? Because ghosting feels personal. It feels like rejection without closure, and most people assume it happens because they said something wrong or weren't interesting enough. But in reality, ghosting is rarely about a single mistake and more often about a combination of psychological factors that have very little to do with your worth. And once you understand how those factors work, the confusion starts to make sense, because the first thing to realize is that ghosting is often a form of avoidance, not aggression, meaning that instead of directly communicating disinterest, discomfort, or changing feelings, some people choose silence because it feels easier than confrontation. And this is tied to emotional discomfort, because many individuals are not comfortable expressing negative feelings or setting boundaries. So rather than having a conversation that might feel awkward or stressful, they withdraw entirely. And this behavior is reinforced by modern communication environments where disappearing is socially possible and often normalized, making avoidance feel like a low-effort solution. And then there is the role of shifting interest, because attention is not static. It changes based on novelty, emotional engagement, and perceived value. And if the interaction becomes predictable, overly available, or emotionally flat, the brain may gradually disengage, not necessarily because something is wrong, but because the level of stimulation decreases, and instead of communicating that shift, some people simply stop responding. And this connects to another important mechanism, which is cognitive overload. Because in a world where people are constantly exposed to messages, notifications, and interactions, maintaining consistent communication requires effort. And when someone feels overwhelmed, they may start prioritizing certain interactions over others, and lower priority conversations can quietly fade without intentional closure. And another key factor is perceived effort imbalance. Because if one person is investing significantly more time, energy, or emotional intensity than the other, it can create pressure, and that pressure can lead to withdrawal, especially if the other person is not ready or willing to match that level of investment. And instead of addressing the imbalance directly, they disengage. And then there is the role of uncertainty, because when someone is unsure about how they feel, they may delay responding while they figure things out, and that delay can turn into avoidance and eventually into complete silence. And this is often less about rejection and more about indecision combined with avoidance. And then there is the influence of alternatives. Because in environments where there are many options for interaction, people may shift their attention toward what feels more immediately engaging or rewarding. And this doesn't necessarily reflect your value, but rather the dynamics of attention and novelty. And another important aspect is emotional capacity, because not everyone has the same ability to maintain communication, process emotions, or handle relational complexity. And when someone reaches their emotional limit, they may withdraw as a way to regulate themselves, even if it leaves the other person confused. And this is why ghosting can sometimes happen even after positive interactions, because it's not always about what happened between you, but about what is happening within them. And then there is the lack of accountability, because ghosting is easier when there are no immediate social consequences, and in digital communication, the absence of face-to-face interaction reduces the emotional weight of disappearing, making it more likely for people to choose avoidance over explanation. And another layer to this is the desire to preserve self-image, because directly rejecting someone can feel uncomfortable or make a person feel like they are being perceived negatively. So ghosting becomes a way to avoid that discomfort, even though it transfers the confusion to the other person. And then there is the impact of expectations, because if expectations are unclear or mismatched, one person may believe the interaction is casual while the other sees it as more meaningful. And when those expectations diverge, disengagement can occur without communication, simply because both people are operating under different assumptions. And ultimately, ghosting is not a clear signal of your value or attractiveness. It is a signal of how the other person handles communication, discomfort, and attention. And once you understand that, you begin to separate your self-worth from someone else's behavior, and you realize that the absence of closure is not a reflection of your importance, but a reflection of their communication style and psychological patterns. And while ghosting can feel frustrating and confusing, it also provides information, because it reveals how someone deals with conflict, uncertainty, and responsibility, and that information can be just as valuable as a direct explanation. And once you shift your perspective from, "Why did they leave me?" to "What does this behavior tell me about them?" you regain a sense of control and clarity, and you stop internalizing something that was never fully about you in the first place. And once you understand the psychology behind ghosting, you begin to see it not as a mystery, but as a pattern. And once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. So if this video helped you understand ghosting from a deeper psychological perspective and gave you clarity you didn't have before, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more insights into human behavior. Because once you understand people, you understand everything.